Hello and welcome. Today we've got John Dowling, and today we're going to be discussing the BRICS level, the currency playing field. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily news reels. John, thank you so much for joining me. I believe we have another presentation that you'd like to show us today regarding what's happening. Why don't you give us a summary?
Well, Nick, first of all, thanks for having me at this late hour over there overseas. I appreciate you taking time on such short notice. Always good to be back here. I have some video slides that I'm going to show you that will accompany the questions you will ask that will give a summary. And the summary is basically this. BRICS next month is bringing about what we believe is the tipping point to the end of this long protracted cycle financially. Tomorrow as you're aware, is a historic rate cut. It's the first time since 2020 this happened. We believe it's going to be in the neighborhood of 25 to 50 basis points. I'm banking on it being more 50 because, quite frankly, the Fed has been lying, as we know, about everything, including the unemployment rates, the job rates, the inflation rates, which is, as you know, inflation at the end of the day is just a tax. And as you're seeing an acceleration of hyperinflation, in parlance, what that means is you're seeing the end of a financial cycle, in this case being the US dollar, which most people know is a debt instrument. Your audience, like mine, as well learn it, so they're probably well aware. So we're coming to a crossroads, I think is a good word, of the old system giving birth into the new system right now.
Interesting. So when you say rate cuts, what does that mean?
What rate cuts mean, Nick, is that's really bad for, it's a good thing. Well, it's good for us that's involved in this investment, because what that means is when you do a rate cut, you start to drop the interest rate percentage, which means that the dollar index, what they perceive the dollar is worth, which is not what it's really worth, but the world would look at the dollar index, whether it's 105 or 101, whatever. As that you cut the rates, you lower the dollar index. That makes the dollar weaker in trade, especially against foreign currencies. I've always said to people on my channel, and for yours, for posterity, when you lower the dollar rate, it's like a dance floor. If you've been at a wedding, right? In order for new people to come on the dance floor, if it's crowded, somebody has to exit to make room for somebody new. Similarly, you have to have the dollar index go lower to make room for the foreign currencies to come up. So as the weaker the dollar index becomes, the stronger the foreign currencies become inversely. So it's an east-west reset. So in shortest language in terms, that's what it means.
So, and who's doing this? Who's behind this? You're saying
the Fed, the Treasury. Trump is behind this, but he's pulling the strings of the Fed to do this. He's telling them don't cut rates, which is reverse psychology for cut the rates. And he came out and said last week, I'll put 100% tax or tariff on you BRICS nations if you go ahead and de-dollarize. But that's only going to motivate them to do it more, because what he's really saying is go ahead and do it. Because as you know, he spearheaded the BRICS. He created it 4, 5, 6 years ago when he put together Putin, Xi, Modi, and Bolsonaro. So Putin is now basically the Trump of the world, who's being the mouthpiece while we wait for President Trump to come back in optically.
Interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and see your presentation, please.
Sure. In lieu of a presentation, I'm going to call it a series of clips that I will share with you for posterity. Let me know, Nick, when you're able to see that for the audience.
So it's coming up now. Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's great.
Okay. So what this is, folks, Nelson Chamisa is slated, as we've said, those of you who've watched before, you know this already. I'm talking to the new viewers. Nelson Chamisa is a Christian who President Trump and Elon Musk are working with behind the scenes. You'll note that in July, we told you that Starlink was available in Zimbabwe. You've now seen that Elon Musk has come out publicly about a week ago or so and said that Starlink is available in Zimbabwe. So you know that Elon Musk is working with Zimbabwe. We also know that President Trump is working by default of working with Elon Musk. They're all in cahoots. So Nelson Chamisa is slated to be the new president of Zimbabwe. Right now, we have a corrupt leader called Edwin Mnangagwa, which I don't have the article in front of me, Nick, but if people go to my Telegram, they can see it. There was an article that came out Sunday that shows that there was a helicopter crash in Zimbabwe, and it's alleged that Edwin Mnangagwa and his VP were on that. We're waiting for confirmation. If that turns out to be the case, then Nelson Chamisa is absolutely going to be slated to be the new president of Zimbabwe. So facto, he's put out here, as you can see, 20 promises he's going to keep within the first 100 days of his administration. And Nick, I'll ask you, since you know this already, working with President Trump, who does that remind you of? President
The
Trump.
120 days, you mean the Nasara?
100. Well, no, I'm talking about the first 20 promises within the first 100 days that he's going to make.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that, but please.
Well, no, I was just very simply, Nick, President Trump is coming out and saying he's going to remove taxes on
Mhm.
the elderly for Social Security. He's going to remove the overtime tax. He's going to remove the income tax. He's going to remove eventually property tax. The reason that he can say that, as you know, is because he's already done it. And so Nelson Chamisa is copying him as they copy each other in this basically this presentation or edict or proposal. There's 20 promises that he's going to keep within the first 100 days, much like President Trump, because the countries, mirror each other. So the two that I highlighted for time's sake is remove the bond notes. Now, I want to be clear. He's not removing the Zimbabwe notes altogether, get rid of them. What he's doing, this important distinction, is he's tucking them in under the ZIG dollars. Recently, a few months ago, they created a ZIG dollar, which is gold backed, to give their country stability and security. Well, the Zim bonds will then, once he's in, be tucked back in under the ZIG dollar, gold backed, of course. So you will have one stable currency to represent the lion's share of their financial wellspring, right? So that's what that means. Then we talked about before, free the airwaves, including cheaper, basically zero internet, Starlink, as we know, it's already there. Now, for history buffs, Nick, they'll recall that a couple of years ago, Tonga never had internet at all. And 2 years ago, I believe, they got Starlink, and now they have the fastest internet on the planet because, for those who don't know, Starlink gives you internet speeds that are 75,000 times faster than what we're being given to this point. So he's going to be changing the education system. President Trump has talked about changing the Department of Education and basically firing or sacking them. So he's going to bring in virtual e-learning. Chamisa is going to be doing likewise. So this is an important document to share with your audience with respect to Zimbabwe and the vast changes that we can expect to see there in the very near future.
Interesting. So, for the viewers who are not sure, John, do you want to tell people who is Nelson Chamisa?
Nelson Chamisa is an appointed Christian. He's a Zimbabwe native. He has been in different elements of governmental leadership in different capacities over the years, but his heart was always to serve and is to serve the nation of Zimbabwe, his fellow natives. He's been running off and on unsuccessfully quite some time to become president because of corruption, not unlike the rest of the world here in America and England and the like. He's been dealing with the same rampant issue, but he stayed fervent to it. He stayed diligent to the plow. And now, as we've discussed, he's going to be, we believe, in a position to actually become the rightful heir to the leadership throne, if you will, of Zimbabwe, to actually be in a capacity to serve his people and not just take from them, as has been done all these years.
So, what's his position right now?
That's a good question. I'd have to go look into that. I think he's so much in the throngs of becoming president that he's probably at a kind of an interim rate right now, interim capacity. I know that they had elections on August 23rd. They kind of stallmated them a little bit, much like we had in 2020, where the election occurred and then it was fraud and it kind of stayed in this limbo state. I think that's where they are right now, and that's what we're waiting to hear back. But I think he's, as I can tell, he's interim elect, but he's been in the government financial cabinet positions in previous leadership roles. So he's kind of somewhere in between.
So the 20 points that you just showed myself and the viewers now, are they the 20 points that Nelson wrote himself?
He did. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And what you're saying is that a lot of them reflect with what Donald Trump is doing, and also with some of the points, maybe with Nasara.
Absolutely. They're almost identical because, what you have over in Zimbabwe is Jasara, which is obviously just the global faction of Nasara. So they intersect and marry quite nicely.
I understand. So where does Zimbabwe fit in with the BRICS?
Quite prominently, actually, because as you know, we can, as a reprise, BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So they're at the tail end component of the BRICS. But I would say they're arguably one of the most powerful, as you know, because they have arguably the world's largest gold supply. Otherwise, they could not back their currency or their dollars at this point, and eventually the bonds in said gold. So they have a tremendous amount of resources to offer. They've got diamonds, they've got gold, they've got silver. I believe they have some type of uranium, plutonium. They have lush landscapes. Their soil is very fertile for farming. So they've got rich crops, is what I'm getting at, because they have an element called the agro checks that people always ask us about, and that's a component that will feed off the currency. So what people have to realize is that when BRICS comes up next month, you have nearly 160 nations. That's roughly 80% of the world's population. So it clearly denotes that they don't need the US anymore, which means they're going to de-dollarize and nationalize their respective currencies by powering up in the aforementioned assets, right? Which they have plenty of, and they have enough of an alliance collectively to do that. But you definitely have to have the resources. They have that. They have the consensus. And it's a very exciting time for people who have ZIM bonds, who have ZIG dollars. And again, the agro checks, which are based on their agricultural wealth or well-being, there will be a good value for those as well.
Interesting. Okay. Let's talk about the Iraqi dinar. What's going on with Iraq? How close are we to the revaluation with their currency, the same way we saw with the Kuwait dinar?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. That's a great question, and it's commonplace, but it's good to discuss. So Iraq's in a good place. I'm looking at my phone right now, Nick, to get the latest updates. If you've been on my Telegram like yours, you know that we're putting them out quite copiously. Iraq right now, over the weekend, they met to replace their speaker, Ali Alak, who is a corrupt Iranian proxy. They are working to replace him with an Iraqi citizen or resident who is not corrupt. Equally importantly, the Central Bank of Iraq, I want to see, Nick, if you bear with me a second, I want to see if I can bring this up to you right now. Let me see if I can share my screen and show you, because a picture paints 1,000 words. If you can see that, let me know.
I can, yeah.
This is the Central Bank of Iraq's new building. This is slated to be the largest building in the Middle East. And the completion rate, Nicholas, is set for this year. Now, I can tell you right now, bet your bottom dollar, they're not doing that on a corrupt debt instrument known as the dollar. So they're scrambling because they have to now hurry. I'm showing some different slides for people to get a little bit of a different vantage point. These are obviously mock-up drawings of said building, but you can see that it's quite affluent. It's one of the largest buildings. They're not going to be doing that sorry, let me go back here. They're not going to be doing that in a corrupt dollar. They're going to be doing that in their own currency, the dinar. So they're working feverishly right now to power it up in assets. They're completing their reforms. They're signing at some point here the oil and gas law. That's where they split the oil credits. Because you have to remember, Nicholas, that the Iraqi citizens are not getting paid the way we are as Americans or Europeans in your case. We're going to trade against the dollar. They're not going to do that. They're going to be getting oil revenue credits or stipends, like a monthly annuity that they can live off of very nicely as a means of compensation in addition to whatever the rate in country is. So they're getting paid differently than we are. But they're in a very good place because it's moving forward. They know that BRICS is coming up. Iraq has already applied to BRICS. They're in the process of completion, as is Iran. The Iranian head speaker has agreed to be there next month. For those who don't know, Iran is the big brother to the little brother Iraq. So that's an interesting denotation because Iran has to get the sanctions removed so that they don't have to live off their little brother anymore and untentacle them ostensibly so that they can power up in their Toman or Rial, depending on where you are in the world with that. They call it different things, obviously, in country. So Iraq's in a pretty exciting place. They've never been here before quite like this. And so, they haven't been here in a long time, and they've never been here where they've been without the constraints of their big brother Iran, and the U.S. troops are also starting to pull out of there slowly as well over a protracted 1 to 2 year rate. So because that was necessary, we're still waiting to see what Israel's going to do in terms of hitting the power plants of Iran to free up Iraq. That may or may not be necessary. We also think, though, ultimately BRICS is going to next month, they're going to say, that's it, cut off the dollar supply. And again, Nick, that will force the nations like Iraq to power up in their respective assets and show their real value. And the real value is not on the Forex. That's an important distinction. It's in the Ministry of Planning, in the private sector. Once that private sector comes out, it will then be reflexive in said Forex and will revalue on the most important part, Nick, which is the digital platform, because we are going to a digital asset-backed system known as a QFS moving forward in this new day and age.
Absolutely. So you're saying that right now the Iraqi dinar is peanuts to buy in dollars, and you could buy millions for peanuts. And when it revalues, it would be almost level playing field, if not the same, according to what Trump has said about, the devaluation of currencies. He wants them to be all level playing field so that we can compete fairly, trade wise. So is this the wealth transfer? How do you see this? What is it for?
Okay, so that's a good question. It's a two-part question, and the way I think of it, it's the second round of the wealth transfer. Or if you look at it, sports analogies, it's the bottom of the first or the beginning of the second quarter in American football or soccer, if you like. It's the next wave. The crypto and the stock market years ago were the beginning of the wealth transfer. This is now the wealth transfer for God's giving people, specifically where we're getting our first crack at it. Whether you like Bitcoin or not, Trump's supporting it. I believe it's going to be used for harm. It's going to be used for good. It's going to be turned around, and he's going to decentralize it. The reason he's putting emphasis on Bitcoin, much like XRP, which we'll talk about in a minute, is because they're decentralized platforms away from the government where people can own it. It's not controlled, it's not manipulated, and it's held privately in the hands of individuals like ourselves. Why this is important is because it gives God's people the true and innate ability to hold and control God's money and wealth, to get it into the hands of the right people, the needy, the poor, the lonely, the hungry, the sick, the widows, the orphans, family, for us to be able to reinvest. God wants us to be in a new season where we're having families and marriages, and Numbers says in the Bible, a good man leaves a legacy for his children and children's children, which you're talking about generational wealth. This is the best and most equitable way, as you said, in essence, to do that. So that's the importance of this wealth transfer, is it's taking away from the wicked, the cabal, and putting it into the hands of the righteous and giving people, which includes people who have different projects, whether you want to call them humanitarian or kingdom projects is irrelevant. It's giving people who have things on their heart that they want to contribute the ability to do so.
So what do we do when it revalues? Do you go straight to the bank if the banks are corrupt? What happens to the banks at that point, and how do you redeem? How do you do the exchange back to dollars or pounds?
So let's answer that question by going back and redressing your previous question as far as rates. We don't do dates and rates here, as you know. But what I will tell you is that I think people are going to be very pleased with the fact of how this is coming out, because it's coming out as a digitally asset-backed platform through mechanisms like XRP, and of course, each country, as I said, nationalizing and thereby powering up their respective currencies and bonds in physical assets, gold, silver, platinum, etc. The blockchain is going to help facilitate that through the banks. So what we're recommending, not financial advisors, not financial advice, we're just giving people information to self-govern and make good discernmental decisions. But what we're going to do is certain banks, Wells Fargo, Chase, potentially Bank of America, if it's still open, which we're not fans of any of them, folks. We're just telling you the tier one banks is going to be the most expedient way to do this. You're going to want to look for those said banks that have a title of wealth asset management on the outside placard, because those specific banks, as you see, Nick, a lot of banks are closing up, because if they're not transparent with Basel III, which means showing their balance sheets of gold and silver that they actually physically have on hand, then they're going to go bye-bye. So that's going to truncate that. And we're going to a new digital platform. So people won't need to go to banks anymore as much. It'll be peer-to-peer banking in the future. President Trump has told you that he's going to decentralize cryptos and he's going to get rid of the SWIFT system. Right? When he said he didn't like Taylor Swift, he was speaking specifically to her handlers and the investments that she has through them, as well as the SWIFT system. It'll be a direct peer-to-peer banking system. So therefore, you don't need as many banks. But for the purposes of this transition, we recommend going to a major bank that has a wealth financial management component, and you will go do it, and you can trade up in dollars or euros or wherever you are respectively. And you'll be able to do that on a free and transparent system. You just simply take those currencies and do an exchange. You don't want to
Yeah.
see an investment. You just want to do an exchange. It's something real for something real in whatever account that you choose to put it.
Yeah. Where did people get the idea that, this is the Iraqi dinar is the currency that's going to do that? One of them. And people say, it's one of the ones that are going to go first. How do we know it's the Iraq? Why is Iraq so special in this?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'll try to be as succinct as I can. I'm going to come at it from a Christian standpoint because that's what I know, or that's how I came into this movement, if you like. Kim Clement, a great prophet we've talked about, he passed away 2 weeks after he prophesied that President Trump would be president before anyone else. He said in April, I think it was April 7th or April 12th of 2007, way before The Simpsons, that we would have a president of hot blood, a outspoken president that would be the president of the highest office in the land. And then he started talking about Trump and coming down the escalator, we now know. And so Mesopotamia is known as Iraq, the land of milk and honey. It's one of the original foundation points in the Old Testament. It even talks about in the Old Testament denarii. So Kim Clement was speaking to that reference point. You have to remember too, Nick, going back for your new viewers, Iraq has been here before, like Vietnam. Those are two unique countries compared to the other countries in the world, like the Venezuelan Bolivar and the Thai baht and so forth, with respect to the fact that during the 1950s, when Saddam Hussein was young, the Iraq dinar was $5 to 1 against the US dollar. So they've been here before. They didn't have a central bank. They were gold backed. They were killed by the US deep state government, the cabal, because they didn't want to implement a central bank in Iraq. We then went in there, colonized it, created a bunch of fake wars, and tamped down that dinar and raped the oil supply, for lack of a better term. So they've been here before. So the reason they're going first is because it's biblically foretold, but they're the ribbon cutter because they are now number 9th in the world in gold reserves, which goes to your question, right? They are second in the Middle East in terms of oil production. They are the number 1 phosphorus producer in the world, which we've touched on, if you recall before. So they bring a lot to the table. Somebody had to be the ribbon cutter, and it makes sense to put a country that has already been prosperous in the past, like Vietnam, to the forefront. That will then pave the way for all the other currencies who have never been here before.
Interesting. Well, John Dowling, listen, thank you very much for sharing everything with us today. It's been a very interesting topic. I'm going to leave the link below for more information for those who want to buy and check out more information on the Iraqi dinar currency. But John, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Well, thanks for your time once again, Nicholas. Always a real pleasure to be with you. It's been an honor the last couple of years. Folks, stay in the fight. We're all tired. We're all exasperated. We're all feeling it. But our greatest strength is in our unity. If you've made it this far, take a moment to thank God and pat yourself on the back and just take it one day at a time, one deep breath, and just keep working towards the end so we can cross this finish line together and just remain in service.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, John, and we'll speak again very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.
You as well.